Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us, and warm welcome to today's GFAR Talks event. This is no longer an innovation, as I used to say when we started with this endeavor last year. It's now becoming an established format with more and more people taking an interest in this type of 1 hour exchange among experts on topics that matter to all of us. My name is Hildegard Lingner. I'm the Executive Secretary of GFAR. We are a global forum, a multi-stakeholder platform of almost 1,000 institutional members for now. We are going to celebrate as soon as we can validate that we indeed have 1,000. And we are super happy to have many of them joining us for this interesting debate we are going to have, thanks of two amazing speakers that took time to be with us today. The multi-stakeholder platform we are happy to host, brings together 1,000 institutions from 13 different constituencies. And one of the elements or the features of these GFAR talks is that we bring different perspectives from different backgrounds. And today I'm very happy that we managed to have Emile Frison from the Agroecology Coalition and Romano de Vivo, our GFAR steering committee member from the private sector. Our moderator, Professor Dr. Syed Azam-Ali, will introduce them in more detail, but I'm just happy and would like to say big thanks to both of you, especially since our chair will be joining, but not in the beginning or closing, because he is running from one meeting to another, but you'll see Dr. Ravi Kirtapal joining us as well. Let me just say 2 sentences. We are super interested in this topic. It has been brought to us and to our attention by our members. We took it up as what we call an emerging initiative, because before we can turn it into our brand way of working, which is a collective action, we need to take it to our steering committee for them to approve. So in doing this, we are happy to further discuss what it's all about and why it's so important, and the different ways of looking at the challenges I think we all share. And my hope is that GFAR, being a multi-stakeholder platform, it is our very duty and privilege to bring together different views and hopefully be able to support joint approaches on this very important challenge that needs to urgently be tackled, ideally with joining as many forces together as we can. With this, I wish us a very interesting discussion. We are going to have one, I'm pretty sure. And let me hand over to Professor Dr. Syed Azam-Ali to further introduce the speaker and the topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Hildegard, and add my welcomes to all of you from all over the world at whatever time it is, different parts of the world. And I'm always impressed that each of these talks attracts more and more people. And not everybody will be here live today, but they will look at the recording. So let me just first of all say, this recording will be available by the end of today on the GFAR YouTube channel. So if you would like to pass the link to your friends, colleagues, counterparts, that would be great. If you want to look at it again, you'll be able to see this in your own time. The schedule we take is as follows. I will introduce our 2 eminent speakers, and they will speak each after the others. So I won't break between them. I'll introduce the 2 speakers, and they'll speak and give a presentation on their perspective on this important topic, and the title of which you already have. However, it isn't just their opinions. We're going to engage with you as the audience, as participants. So we want you to really engage with us in terms of questions, comments, feedback, so that we get as much of the participation from you as possible in the time available. And for that, you need to use the chat function. And if you can send your questions through the chat function, there will be many, there always are. We'll filter them and they'll be sent to me, and I'll bring those questions for the attention of our 2 speakers. So they will be able to give feedback rather than me just ask them questions. There'll be questions from you, which I'll try and engage with them on, so that burning issues you can raise right from the word go as soon as you start listening to our speakers. At the end of it, I want to introduce an important person who's going to finish our talk today, and it's all going to be within an hour, is Glyndis Glindis Luciano is representing, if you like, the young community, and we're more and more engaged with young people in the agriculture and agri-food space. And Glindis will make some comments from the Young Professionals for Agricultural Research and Development, who are co-hosts of this. So GFAR are hosting this with YPAD, and YPAD will make the concluding comments and her personal remarks, so that we can actually gather as much perspective from a youth view on the issues that have been raised by our two distinguished panelists. So that's our routine, that's the schedule we'll follow. And it's my honor now to introduce our two speakers. And as I say, one will follow the other. So the first speaker is Emile Frison, who's an expert on agriculture, biodiversity, agroecology, and sustainable food systems. He's the senior advisor to the Agroecology Coalition and a member of the International Panel of Experts on Sustainable Food Systems, IPES. Emile spent his entire career in international agricultural research for development, including 6 years in Africa, in Nigeria and Mauritania. And I first met him when he was the Director General of Biodiversity International between 2003 and 2013. And since then, Emile has focused on advancing sustainable agriculture and food systems. He's the lead author of the IPES Food Report, From Uniformity to Diversity, a paradigm shift from industrial agriculture to diversified agroecological systems. So you get a hint of where he will be coming from in his presentation. Immediately after him, Romano di Vivo will be speaking, and Romano will talk his background. He has over 2 decades of experience in championing sustainable agriculture. But he's the sustainability leader at Croplife International, and he steers the organization's environmental initiatives, forges partnerships, prioritizing innovative farming, adaptive food systems, and impactful climate solutions. Now, before Croplife, Romano contributed to sustainability and environmental strategies at 2 major entities, Givaudan and Syngenta. And before and beyond the corporate sphere, Romano engages in public research and shares his expertise as a lecturer at the University of Piacenza and University Freiburg Center for Corporate Social Responsibility and Sustainability. So you can see the eminence and breadth of our 2 distinguished speakers today. I'll ask first Emile to give his opening remarks and his presentation. Emile, over to you.
Thank you. I will share my screen. There we go. So I want to talk about the urgent need for an agroecological food system transformation. We all know that our current food systems are not sustainable. And I'm not going to go through the detail. You're all familiar with the issues of greenhouse gases, biodiversity losses, water, air and soil pollution, climate change, and the triple burden of malnutrition that is still getting worse instead of improving, and the lack of social equity. And all of these issues are actually associated with our current food system based on industrial agriculture. We need transformational change. I think since 2016, there have been an impressive number of major reports, all highlighting the need for transformational change, that incremental improvements of our current model of food systems and agriculture is not going to be able to deliver the kind of change that we need. And all of these reports are also mentioning agroecology as a major way to achieve that kind of transformation. So what we need is really a different paradigm, a paradigm shift towards diversified agroecological systems in order to address simultaneously economic, environmental, climate mitigation and adaptation, health, social and cultural objectives, and not one at the expense of the other, as we are still seeing today, where focus is on productivity at the expense of the environment, at the expense of human health, etc. This paradigm is based on the 13 principles that have been developed by the high-level panel of experts of the Committee on World Food Security in 2019, and which are aligned with the 10 elements of agroecology adopted by the FAO Council in 2019. And these are dealing with issues of recycling, of input reduction and replacement, soil health, animal health, biodiversity, the creation of synergies, economic diversification, but also at the food system level, looking at improving connectivity, at co-creation and sharing of knowledge, about social values and diets, about fairness, participation, and land and natural resource governance. These more social dimensions are extremely important part of the change that we need. The implementation of these 13 principles, they have to be considered as a package. It's not a picking list where we say, well, we'll address the principle number 2 and number 5, and that's it. A real transformation requires all these aspects to be tackled simultaneously. All these principles should be implemented simultaneously. And these principles are applicable everywhere and at all scales. But the action on the ground is very location and situation specific. So there's no silver bullet of a set of practices that should be applied everywhere. It's the principles that should be applied everywhere, but the action on the ground is very location and situation specific. These principles are also very useful as a guide in designing initiatives, projects, etc. And as I already said, the social dimensions are extremely important. Building social capital is an essential aspect of the success of an agroecological transformation, and they constitute the basis of food sovereignty. So agroecology has a different paradigm. It's not just a set of agricultural practices. And also, it's taking the best of all innovations, but not any innovation, innovations that are compatible with the 13 principles of agroecology, and combining modern science with traditional and farmer knowledge in a co-creation mode. It's also about changing the social relations, empowering farmers, adding value locally, privileging short value chains that link consumers and producers. And so it's a holistic, integrated approach to reach economic, environmental, climate, health, social, and cultural objectives, and actually achieving the SDGs as a package. So there are, of course, different situations. We start from different points in different parts of the world. Whether we start from underperforming subsistence agriculture or from an unsustainable industrial agriculture model, we need to apply these principles, but adapt our action locally to move towards diversified agroecological farming that delivers on all these aspects at the same time. There are now many examples of agroecology at scale available in different parts of the world. I'm just mentioning a few here about large-scale farmer-managed natural regeneration in the Sahel, that is regreening the Sahel. In Andhra Pradesh, where over 800,000 farmers have been practicing what they call natural farming, and where a recent study published just a few months ago has shown that compared to farmers that are continuing to use a conventional farming approach based on chemical inputs, that there is an 11% increase in productivity and 50% increase in net income, a combination of the increased productivity and the savings on purchased inputs. The Alliance for Agroecology in West Africa, that is now bringing together 72 organizations that are practicing agroecology, and that is recognized by the regional organization ECOWAS as the promoter of agroecology in the region. Farmer organizations are adopting agroecology in their strategy, and more national policies are supporting agroecology in different parts of the world. We have now enough evidence to show that from a productivity point of view, we can equal and sometimes improve the productivity compared to the conventional industrial model. But that income in general is better. And a very important aspect is that the resilience and stability of the production is much better, which is a very important factor for poor smallholder farmers that have no reserves. And if a shock comes, they are in very difficult situation. From an environmental point of view, it's allowing us to put carbon in the soil, it's boosting biodiversity, it's the ability to restore degraded land, which is really an essential aspect if we want to avoid further deforestation. And it's improving ecosystem services, such as water, nutrient cycling, pollination, pest and disease management. From a nutrition and health point of view, it's avoiding the negative health outcomes of industrial agriculture by avoiding pesticides, antibiotics, and nitrates. It's improving and providing for diverse, healthy diets. And the food produced also has increased levels of beneficial nutrients, such as omega-3 fatty acids and antioxidants, such as polyphenols. From a social and cultural point of view, it's building social capital, it's empowering actors in the food chain, it's creating employment throughout the year, it's bringing closer links between producers and consumers, it's bringing back a lot of diversity of traditional crops that have been abandoned, and it's integrating traditional knowledge. So this transformational change requires a food system approach. It's not just about changing production practices, it's also about changes in knowledge generation and transmission, changes in social and economic relations, and changes in the institutional framework based on the 13 principles that I already mentioned. A few years ago, in 2020 and 21, a few organizations like IPES Food, IFORM Organics International, Agroecology Europe, Vivo, and Regeneration International got together to see what do we propose as a way forward that we can all stand behind. And we very rapidly came to an agreement that the 13 principles, as defined by the high-level panel of experts, is something that we all consider as guiding us in the movement forward. And we issued a call for a unifying framework for food system transformation based on these 13 principles. This call not only had the backing of these organizations, but actually was signed by over 270 organizations worldwide and by more than 850 scientists and food system workers throughout the world. So there is a great momentum now about considering these 13 principles as an important guide for future transformation. I just want to conclude by saying a word about the Agroecology Coalition that was formed in 2021. It now counts actually 47 countries and 3 regional commissions, the European Commission, the African Union Commission, and the ECOWAS Commission, and over 150 organizations, and the numbers are increasing every week. The purpose is really to accelerate food system transformation through agroecology based on the 13 principles, and you can find more information about the coalition on the website. So to conclude, some of the key messages is that we need fundamentally different food systems based on diversified agroecological systems. These systems are economically performing, and particularly in situations of environmental stress. They are equitable and just, and are the basis of food sovereignty. They allow us to adapt to climate change, to protect the environment, increase biodiversity. And what is important to realize is that change is happening. It's not something that we dream about for the future. It is being implemented, it is working, and the Agroecology Coalition actually provides an opportunity now to accelerate the transformation of our food systems. And I thank you for your attention. I will be happy to answer any questions later on.
Emile, many, many thanks. And we're flooded with questions. So lots of questions coming in, lots are engaged with this. But let me, before we move to questions and discussion, let me ask Romano di Vivo to come back with his own introduction and coming especially from his own experience in the private sector. Romano.
Thanks, Hildegard. Thanks, Tayed, for this great opportunity. And thanks also to Emile for sharing the floor today. So in our ever-changing world, we are facing some significant challenges. More people are going hungry, the population is exploding, the climate is changing, and we are losing our soils and our biodiversity. And farm workers still live in poverty. So agriculture is both a contributor and a victim of climate change. And there are indeed many things to change, to transform. But we should not forget that agriculture so far helped humankind to overcome the Malthusian trap and to promote longer lives and economic growth. So it is time to consider the next evolution to tackle today's challenges better. And several frameworks so far from a social, economic, and environmental sustainability have developed different definitions and processes. What I have noticed is that if you analyze them from an outcome perspective, they are not so different. So given that we have little time left to address the challenges, it becomes imperative to focus on solutions rather than concepts, and to focus on the outcomes. And the outcomes that are dealing with regenerating the natural resources and biodiversity. And this is critical for agriculture while we are sustaining and increasing food production for a growing population and improving nutrition. And the different types of sustainable agriculture, such as regenerative agriculture, conservation agriculture, climate-smart agriculture, and agroecology, are united by a combination of practices, or technologies, or capacity building. So the first step, I think, would be for us to agree on the outcomes we want. And these outcomes are increasing productivity, profitability, strengthening rural livelihoods, reducing emissions, promoting climate adaptation, restoring the land through improved soil health, increased biodiversity, and increased water infiltration. Secondly, we must develop an agreed set of indicators to measure this progress towards the outcomes. And those indicators need to focus on productivity, on emissions, on soil health and biodiversity, including agrobiodiversity, and livelihoods improvements, particularly for smallholders. And the third point is that to make this happen, we cannot just talk the talk. We need to put policies in place that make it easier for farmers to get on board and to access the technologies, the practices, the capacity building opportunities that better suit their environment. Because the local adaptation to local environment is another important element. So new technologies, such as those that help us better understand the use of data, genomics and metagenomics, a better understanding of how agrobiodiversity improves resilience, livelihoods, and nutrition, circular economy principles, improve technologies to monitor how practices are affecting the environment. So drones, sensors, big data, and other opportunities to monitor disease and pest will be all game changers in making agriculture successful in tackling the global challenges. And simultaneously, by reviving natural processes on the farms, we will be able to keep soil health and fertility, to promote different farm life, to protect our natural ecosystems, to save land, to keep food prices affordable. All this is what I call regenerative agriculture. And this is the idea of an outcomes-based approach to farming that is adapted to local conditions, that combines innovative technologies, farming practices, and capacity building to increase productivity, profitability, strengthening rural livelihoods, reducing emissions, promoting climate adaptation, restoring the land through improved soil health, increased biodiversity, and water infiltration. So I think an old way of thinking suggested that we must choose between growing more food that harms our environment or growing less food to preserve the planet. More and more literature shows that this is not true, and that with regenerative agriculture, we can do absolutely both. Grow enough food in a way that helps our planet. So while this is an emerging reality that sees more and more governments, food companies, farmer organizations, research institutes, and multi-stakeholder platforms working to achieve concrete implementations and proper monitoring of outcomes, there are still few policies and incentives supporting the transition and managing it to minimize disruption and trade-offs. So there is the need to have more funds, to spread knowledge and teach skills, and to get everyone work together, especially in parts of the world where these things are more challenging. Carbon credit schemes, increased payments for ecosystem services, certification programs, alternative financing, mixed financings are all available tools. Public investments in agriculture, regional development banks can also play a role in making this happen. And clearly, at the end, it's a broad convergence of technologies, practices, capacity building, where every single farmer can choose what fits to his own environment. Also, more research is needed on potential economic benefits to convince policymakers that food security will be improved and farmers can increase their income, that we are able to create jobs for the next generations, that we are able to improve the nutrition for a large population, that we can improve diets and availability of nutrients so essential for our health. And to bring this evidence, farmers, researchers, policymakers, and community organizations must work together to make regenerative agriculture take off. And this starts with agreeing on what we want to achieve, how to measure our progress, and how we move forward, making technologies, practices, and capacity building accessible to farmers. And the international and national scientific community can agree on a joint set of outcomes that can be promoted and monitored through different sustainability agricultural frameworks. Governments and private investors can fund and support regenerative agriculture, and they can decide which process they are more interested in helping, as long as they align with the higher level goals. In conclusion, we have very important roots in decades of agricultural research and practical implementation. We have learned a lot from conservation, from climate smart, and particularly from agroecology approaches. Still, agriculture has changed, and regenerative agriculture fully offers the opportunity to integrate innovative technologies, agricultural practices, and capacity buildings towards targeted outcomes and opportunities to tackle global challenges for our people and our planet. Thank you very much.
Romano, thank you. And again, wonderful presentation. So we don't have enough time, even in half an hour, to touch on these issues, but we have to make progress in terms of what, in our discussion, we can agree on? What are the issues that we feel we have to really come back to later? But I want to come to one question which has come up many, many times, and one I face as well, which is, look, I'm a farmer, I'm a small-scale farmer, and I want to grow crops, and I want to produce, environmentally sensible outcomes, which I don't want to go and destroy the planet, but I have to make a living. I have to make a living out of growing crops. And in both of your cases, you've referred to local adaptation of principles, local specific circumstances, and that it can be economically beneficial to look at these alternative models, regenerative and agroecological. Can we give some examples of that? Emile first, and then Romano. Where can you show examples where farmers have actually made economic benefits from agroecological farming, and they have been able to do it without the drudgery and manual labor and the work involved in doing things which have previously been relied on in terms of mechanization and industrial systems? Emile, show us some examples of success stories, please.
Thank you. I already alluded to one, and one that is really at scale, because this is not just involving a few hundred farmers or a few thousand farmers, but rather close to 1 million farmers in Andhra Pradesh, and where a detailed scientific study has really demonstrated that it's allowing the farmers that have shifted towards agroecology, which, as I said, is called natural farming in Andhra Pradesh, has allowed them to increase productivity compared to farmers that are still continuing to produce with the chemical fertilizers and pesticides, and have had 50% higher income in average. 50%. I mean, this is really because of the higher productivity and the savings on inputs. This has a tremendous impact, not only because of the higher income, but also because of the less dependency on having to take up loans to buy external inputs. And that makes farmers vulnerable. You all know about the high rates of farmer suicides in India, for example, that are linked to that issue. And what is remarkable is that in all the communities that have been practicing this natural farming now since 6 or 7 years since it started, there hasn't been a single suicide of those that shifted. I think this is an important, very speaking indicator. And there are examples of how this transformation has been beneficial for farmers in different parts of the world. And this kind of evidence is now really being published in different publications as well. Okay. Maybe just one sentence about outcomes and principles. Those are really the two flip sides of the same reality. We also in agroecology want to focus on the outcomes. The principles is what guides us to those outcomes. It's what helps us to move towards the outcomes. But what matters are absolutely the outcomes. But it's important to be very clear on what you should be guided by in moving towards these outcomes, and that it doesn't have any perverse consequences as well. So I'll leave it at that for the moment. Thank you,
Emile. Romano.
Yes. I mean, regenerative agriculture is a relatively recent concept. But the reality is that it's quickly making inroads in the responsible sourcing policies of many companies. Even we see that is appearing now in the policies of some governments and in some of the most recent trade agreements between governments. And in fact, if we look then at the concrete implementation around the world, we can see that we have a lot of examples. For example, in Asia Pacific about rice and cotton, in Latin America on corn, soybeans, wheat, bananas, rice, sugarcane. In North America, all the staple crops. In Europe, cereals, corn, fruit, grape, olive, citrus, vegetables. And many of these projects are with smallholder farmers. So, and are in the global south, meaning that, for example, I mean, I was so fortunate to be exposed last week to some of the projects in Asia Pacific, and smallholders, farmers that are producing, having access to this broad convergence of technologies, practices, and capacity building opportunities. And they are producing more, but also enhancing biodiversity, improving soil health, conserving water, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, improving adaptation, and improving their livelihoods. So this is very concrete, and these are projects in India, Pakistan, Philippines, even China. So, I mean, this is a reality that is growing very fast, showing that we don't need any more new orthodoxy. We can provide the outcomes and the point of reference for the farmers to choose the right combinations. They are entrepreneurs, and particularly the new generations of farmers. They can choose the right technologies, the right practices, the right opportunities of capacity building to produce more, to support. And I mean, the real transformation that we need is that, according to FAO, the 80% of these farmers don't have a decent livelihood. This is part of the transformation that we need to consider. The social part is very important. And then we are not going to put on top of the current social issues also the issues that they cannot access what they need. This would be extremely unfair.
Okay, so examples from both of you, and concrete examples of scaling up and of impact and of income and livelihoods. Now, let me try and unpick something else, which is also going to be a question that people are asking. Our current model has never been simpler, has it? We grow a series of monocultures of staple crops under a certain combination of circumstances, and that model has been exported all around the world. So what we call the Green Revolution is the model of global agriculture, and we're familiar with it, and we can get our heads around it because it's very straightforward. We know what we need to achieve, and we know the mechanisms and technologies to achieve that. Now, you know, just in today's conversation, the terms nature positive, agroecology, regenerative, holistic, organic, permaculture, climate smart, conservation, how can we present that as a unified alternative? Or are they all variations of the same thing, or are they all completely different? Because if we don't present a coherent alternative model, it'll end up with everyone picking holes in each other. So what I want from both of you are the uniform principles. I mean, we touched on principles before. Of course, we need principles to guide practice, but what are the things in common? If you can simply illustrate between you, what is the difference between regenerative and agroecological? Are they the same thing? Are they different? Because I think this is really what people will be asking outside this room. How do we uncouple what we seem to be providing as complexity when actually what we need are coherent solutions? Romano, you go first.
So thanks, Syed. Clearly, I mean, I said before, we have a very rich opportunity to look into the last decades of scientific papers and implementation of farming practices all around the world. And I think regenerative agriculture is learning from that. And so basically, all the principles, all the practices, all the technologies, all the capacity building opportunities, everything can be included in regenerative agriculture. It's not an exclusive club. It's a very inclusive opportunity. And this is extremely important because we don't exclude anything that could help farmers to improve. What we want also to say, though, and this is extremely important, that we only have regenerative outcomes. There are no regenerative practices, there are no regenerative technologies, there are no regenerative knowledge opportunities. So only the combination of all these elements selected by farmers at local level provides regenerative outcomes. And I think this is the major distinction that honestly I don't see in other models.
Okay, Emile.
I would like to make a slight distinction among this large number of terminologies that you put on the table, Syed. Some of them are very general, like nature positive, that have been used more in environmental fields and have not really been defined in terms of agriculture in any specific way. Others are tackling a very specific question, like climate smart agriculture is really looking at the climate dimension and is not explicitly paying attention to some of the other dimensions, whether it's biodiversity, whether it's health, etc. Nutrition sensitive agriculture has been used also. That's looking really at the nutrition thing. To me, regenerative agriculture and agroecology, as I said in the call for food system transformation based on 13 principles that was endorsed by so many organizations and researchers, what matters is not the word that you use, it's the what you put behind it. So I have, if regenerative agriculture is, as Regeneration International, as the organization that has been promoting regenerative agriculture at the international level, is agreeing, if that is based on the implementation of the principles that I referred to, the HLP principles, then I'm perfectly fine with using the term regenerative agriculture. Where there is a problem is when there is an attempt to misuse the terms, and that's the same whether it's regenerative agriculture or agroecology, that are being misused for greenwashing purposes. And we have to be very clear that this exists. Not everybody is wanting, or there are some vested interests that want to maintain a current unsustainable system in place. So if we are genuine about the really transformative nature and looking at all these aspects that are reflected by the 13 principles, and I think most of what Romano also mentioned in regenerative agriculture, I think then it's not whether one term is better than the other, it's what you put behind it. And there are, as I said, there are attempts in using both terms for practices and approaches that are really not regenerative and are certainly not equitable, etc. So we must look beyond the terms and look at what is behind it. And I think between what Romano said and what I've been saying, there aren't many big differences in the intention, but the devil lies in the details on what actually you put behind these terms. And as I said, the aspect of innovation, it's something that is often used as an argument against agroecology, pretending that it's against innovation. I think it's almost by definition innovation. Agroecology is about permanent co-innovation, bringing science and the knowledge of farmers and actors in the food chain together to continue continual improvement of their systems. And all the technologies that are compatible with the 13 principles are more than welcome in this. It's only if things are imposed from the top without any participation and has negative consequences on equity, etc., that we should think twice before adopting a technology. But it's certainly very innovative and prone to take on those innovations that can contribute to implementing and to the outcomes that we want.
Okay, thank you. That's helped a lot. And I think people are now beginning to get a feel for this and understanding the similarities and principles that we can use. But another question that's come up, and we've talked about scale, we've talked about impact. What about speed? And this is really, we now are beginning increasingly to recognize that this is not a long-term issue. Climate change and the crisis of the food system is not going to happen a long time away from here somewhere else. It's going to happen now. It is happening now. So how do we implement these changes so we actually get the word transformation in reality? So let's think about how we can not move to scale, but to move to speed so that these practices now become the norm rather than ones that we are advocating. Emile, help us with how we can move at speed to change.
Well, first of all, there has to be a real shift in where the investments are being made. As long as most of the investments are still supporting what you call a green revolution model based on maximizing productivity on using chemical inputs, that I think is going to be slowing down any transformation. For example, subsidies that are being paid out in whether it's in Europe, in North America, or elsewhere, that focus on supporting the continuation of current production systems instead of investing in the transformation, is really going to slow down. So if we had a repurposing of subsidies, of investments in agriculture to support the transformation towards regenerative agroecological systems, that will be making this transformation faster. And we know it can be fast. I have witnessed, for example, again, there was another example from India where land that had been abandoned for 5 or 6 years because it wasn't economically worthwhile growing anything there because the land was so degraded. The natural farming approach allowed them to have a decent harvest in the first year. So when you move in the right direction, change can happen very fast. But it's a matter of the political will and the right investments being made on the transformation rather than continuing, let's say, investing in a business as usual way.
Okay. And Romano, the same, but I mean, the private sector is a big place and you can't speak for all of it, but if you can give us a perspective as to how is the private sector taking on change, and Emile and others will say greenwashing and of course using it to protect what they're already doing in a different way, but not changing business. How do you think, and at what speed do you think industry and the food industry particularly is prepared to make this paradigm shift? Is that going to happen quickly? And if it is, how do we encourage that to happen quickly?
Yeah, the good news is that it's all already happening. And if you look at what is happening in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, in the States, in Europe, I mean, you would see that there are not only farmers implementing regenerative agriculture, but there are international organizations and financial institutions supporting them. Some of the most important development banks are supporting regenerative agriculture projects. So the idea of regenerative agriculture made already inroads in the principles that are supporting the global financing of projects. It is one of the most important things because farmers need to be supported from a financial perspective. So we are already there. This is happening. And today, for example, the European Parliament is ratifying the trade agreement with New Zealand, where they have regenerative agriculture inside the trade agreement. There is no agroecology. And I mean, there is an important shift. Agriculture is not what it was 20 years ago. Agriculture is made of a broad convergence of technologies, practices, and capacity building. We cannot forget this. We cannot stop the time. I mean, it's time really to accelerate. Things are happening. We are ready to accelerate. The private sector is supporting very much the acceleration, particularly because we need to produce more. Still this year, the publication from UN SOFI is telling us that 9.2% of the population is not having enough food. So we need, together with the environmental objective, together with the social objective, we need to produce more. And technologies are helping. If you think about things like gene editing, I mean, we can completely reshuffle the crop rotations very quickly, very cheap. I mean, each university in each state can really work, even with local agrobiodiversity, to redesign the crop rotations. And there are a number of biological solutions coming. There are chemical solutions that are improved also thanks to the adjacent technologies, the digital technologies that are improving enormously the precision. So these things are a reality. Unfortunately, the biggest issue that I see today is the fact that people are ignoring that agriculture is not anymore what it was 20 years ago.
Okay, thank you. So we've talked about scale, we've talked about speed, we've talked about the alternative model, but all of these things require underpinning evidence, and we've talked about evidence, but we haven't specifically talked about something in the title, which is research, a paradigm shift in research. So, Emile, please, what is that paradigm? I want to put it in two phases. One, we need to do research, or do we need to do research? Is the evidence already there? And if we need to do research, how do we put farmers at the center of that research? Because in the previous model, they were not at the centers. They were the recipients of research that we gave them technologies they then took up. So how do we put farmers at the center of this innovation? And what is the paradigm shift that you envisage that the research is actually going to be different to the model that we now have and are familiar with in our academic institutions?
I think that's a very important question you raised there, and I think we have to say if we want to give the farmers the choice to go in the direction they want, they have to be involved in all processes right from the start, and that includes being involved in research in a participatory way, and that is a fundamentally evolution that is extremely important, is to move from the kind of linear top-down approach of research that has been predominant in the past towards really being co-innovation between scientists and farmers on the ground, and first listen to what their problems are and try to bring a solution to it, rather than come with a solution and then see which problem it can fix. So I think that's a fundamental difference in approach that is required. It's also training scientists in participatory approaches. Scientists have not been trained. I studied agricultural science many years ago. I didn't have any clue in my curriculum about what participatory research was looking like. I think that's a fundamental change that has to happen in order to put the farmers at the center and make sure that whatever we bring as innovation is helping the smallholder farmers to address their needs and not needs that are being thought for them.
Okay, and Romano?
Never stop research and innovation. We need always more. We need to continue. We need to always investigate. I think this is absolutely fundamental. The private sector is completely about researching, innovating, and putting on the market new solutions that are always more precise, more effective, better for the environment, better for the people. And clearly, I mean, innovation is not just about new elements. It's also about reconsideration of elements that are part of the tradition. So, for example, regenerative agriculture puts forward crops and livestock. And this is a way to go back also to a more traditional idea of agriculture. So the integration is innovative, but in reality is taking elements from the tradition. And these are the innovative processes that we need. And we need always more of them. And we need to stimulate these processes to be able to not just look at the current challenges, but also anticipate possible challenges, because the cooperative approach is a very good one for certain issues, but anticipation is also another research approach. They need to be there, because sometimes we cannot really fully understand, I mean, what sort of challenges we will have to deal with in the next future.
Thank you. Now, at this point, I usually, of course, we always run out of time, but this has been absolutely fascinating, and we could go on for a long, long time. But rather than ask you for your concluding remarks, I want to give you a question, and I should pay, a quick mention to where I am. I'm actually hosted here at the University of Nottingham, and I've just been teaching students, and therefore, it's very good to engage with students about these issues, and they've benefited from this conversation discussion. But there was an excellent question that was asked that I did my best to answer, but I want you to help me answer that question as your concluding comment, which was, the question was, so what can I do about it? You're now bringing to me the urgency of this. You're telling me that we have to do things differently. You're telling me that this current model is broken. We've got to find an alternative. But as an individual, what can I do that actually can help move things forward? And what should I do in my personal life that can actually contribute for, who's responsible for the change that we need, and what can I do to contribute to it? I'll ask Romano first, and then Emile, if you could give your final thoughts on that.
I think, for agricultural stakeholders, I would say that the three essential elements are agreeing on the outcomes so that we can have really a common ground and make sure that all the resources are converging towards the same objectives. Then we need to agree on the measurements. It's important that we are able to understand how the implementation is progressing. And this is an essential element also to attract the financial community, because we need more investments in agriculture. And the third element, we need to implement, and often we need access to technologies, to practices, to knowledge, to infrastructures. And this access needs to be supported by policies and by cultural approaches that are inclusive of all the elements that can support farmers. I think these are the three essential elements. For non-agricultural stakeholders, it would be a little bit more difficult, but I guess that your students are all following the first category.
No, they're all consumers, like everybody. So as a consumer, Emile, help us to say, what changed in my behavior?
I was going to say, probably your question is more directed towards citizens, us all as citizens or consumers, of course. I think that changes in the production system cannot happen if there are no changes on the consumption side. And that's why we have to take a food system approach. And that's why agroecology is about transforming the entire food system from input production to waste, down to consumption and waste management. And therefore, I think as citizens, we have to make sure that we just don't buy the cheapest food, even if it is produced in unsustainable ways, that we also push for, as a citizen, that we push policymakers through our election processes and other advocacy efforts, that we push towards making the necessary policy changes to make the shift towards sustainable food systems a reality. And I think it's really trying to all work together, all the people that want to work towards the more sustainable, resilient, and just and fair and equitable food systems, insisting on the last 3 points, which is what often falls through the cracks when we focus only on some of the more visible outcomes and not what really matters to people. So I think that we all have a role to play.
Fantastic. I want to thank both of you. This has been absolutely fascinating, and the conversation has been remarkably rich here. With respect, I'm going to turn probably the most important person in the room and her constituency, which is young people. And Glyndis Virginia Luciano is going to give the concluding remarks with her own personal view of what she's heard, and really just giving a perspective from young people, professionals, yes, but the young people who are the future, not just of agriculture and food, but across the planet. So Glyndis, the floor is yours to give the concluding remarks, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you so much, Syed. I just really want to echo the words of Emile. That was a wonderful way to bridge into what I would like to point out. It was definitely a fruitful conversation and discussion. But I just wanted to bring in the youth perspective, because there was one question that was brought by Romano. What's our vision when we're talking about our food systems, the future for food systems, and what do we want for this outcome to be? I then want to echo the words that Emile mentioned a couple of times, which is we want equitable and just food systems. And I think that this is at the heart of the conversation when we're talking about a food systems transformation, just food systems. And so we talked a lot today about small scale farmers, which definitely should be at the heart of the conversations, but so should also be young people, women, indigenous peoples, because a just food systems transformation, it's not just about the production aspect. It's about all the other aspects that we did not talk about today, actually. As you had mentioned, Syed, also, it's about all the other aspects that perhaps we cannot see the impact as quickly as when we're looking at the production aspect. But what about communities? I also wanted to highlight in general, in particular, when it comes to young people, we are already contributing a lot when it comes to this agroecological transition. I think definitely at the local level, we're not doing enough to connect all the different projects that are already happening, all the evidence that's coming from the ground, especially when we consider that agroecology should also be a bottom-up approach. That's really truly one of the aspects of agroecology that we also did not mention here. We mentioned the connection between research and farmers, but it has to be research, farmers, communities that are all part of it. We know that when we're talking about young people, there's a huge issue with the migration from rural to urban areas because we're not seeing the rural as places to invest. And so when we're talking about agriculture investments, this also means rural communities as well, if we're serious about being able to develop areas for where the future generations actually want to live in and contribute. I recently spoke with a farmer actually at the FAO. She came from a farming family system from Uruguay, and I know we're running out of time, but I just wanted to close with this. She was like, there's always such a productivist talk about us as small scale farmers. It's always production. Yes, we want to ensure that we have a good family business, but we also want the right to a good life. We also deserve to have fun. We also deserve to live. We also deserve to have everything that people in urban areas have. We cannot just be viewed as productions for society, as providing food. There's much more to us than that. And so when we're having these conversations about a food systems transformation, I really want to close with that. If we're thinking about the future generations, these are the points that we need to think of. How do we make communities more equitable and just? How do we ensure that we're actually creating the pipeline for the new young people? We need capacity building. We need financial resources. All the other innovations that are also just, and that we don't fall into the same extractivist traps that often happens when we're discussing a lot of different definitions. And so I will close here. Thank you so much for the wonderful discussion today. And I wish that we had way more time to be able to continue. Thank you, Syed, Emile, Romano, Hildegard, the GFAR team, and thank you to all that came here today to join. I hope that we find more ways to connect, and I hope to see you all at the next GFAR discussion. Thank you.